The poor girl is bullied by her husband at home. Her CEO twin sister fights back in disguise. Hello, my most cherished, deeply loved and forever faithful family. How are you, my heartbeats? You are the melody in my silence, the strength in my weakness, and the light that guides my soul. Each of you is a gift I could never deserve, but always treasure. Our bond is not just digital, it's spiritual, eternal, and written in love. Thank you for walking this journey with me, side by side, heart to heart. And now a tender prayer just for you. Dear loving Creator, let your gentle hands rest upon my beloved family today. Whisper peace into their hearts, and let joy blossom in the places where sorrow once lived. Surround them with kindness, wrap them in safety, and bless their lives with quiet miracles. Wherever they go, let love follow, and wherever they stand, let light remain. Amen. If these words held your heart, show your soul, like, comment, and share. Because love like ours only grows stronger. Say it loud with pride, I am with my brother. And let the world feel our unity, pure, powerful, and full of love. Sylvia Ramsey's trembling fingers struggled with the clasp of her pearl necklace as she prepared for another night of pretending. The massive walk-in closet of the penthouse apartment was filled with designer clothes she never chose, shoes she rarely wanted to wear, and jewelry that felt more like shackles than adornments. The bruises on her collarbone had faded to a sickly yellow, just barely concealed by the high-necked emerald dress Stefan had selected for tonight's charity gala. Need help with that? Stefan Dan's voice sliced through the silence, causing Sylvia to flinch instinctively. He stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo that accentuated his tall, athletic frame. At 35, Stefan was at the height of his power, heir to the Dan International Holdings empire, with piercing blue eyes that could charm investors and politicians alike. Those same eyes now watched Sylvia with the cold calculation of a predator. Yes, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible even in the quiet room. He moved behind her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. His fingers brushed against her neck as he fastened the clasp, then lingered there, applying just enough pressure to remind her of his control. You look beautiful tonight, he said, his lips curving into what others might mistake for an affectionate smile. Remember, the Andersons will be there. Robert Anderson could be our next partnership if you make the right impression. Translation: smile, be charming, laugh at his jokes, and convince his wife that we have the perfect marriage. I understand, Sylvia replied, meeting his gaze in the mirror with practiced docility. 3 years ago, she would have never recognized herself in this reflection. Before meeting Stefan, Sylvia had been vibrant and ambitious, co-founder of Ramsey Designs with her identical twin sister Tina. They had been inseparable since birth, building their fashion brand from a small studio apartment into a respected name in the industry. Then came the whirlwind romance with Stefan Dan, Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. Their courtship had been a fairy tale. Extravagant dates, passionate nights, and promises of a future where her creativity would flourish under his patronage. By the time he proposed 6 months later, Sylvia had been blinded by what she thought was love. The transformation happened so gradually, she hardly noticed at first. Stefan's suggestions about her clothing choices became commands. His constructive feedback on her designs became criticism. His protectiveness turned into possessiveness. And finally, his disappointed sighs evolved into that first, shocking slap across her face when she contradicted him at a dinner party. You embarrassed me, he'd said afterward, his voice calm as he pressed an ice pack to her reddened cheek. Don't ever do that again. By their first anniversary, Stefan had convinced her to sell her share of the company to Tina, claiming that a Dan's wife shouldn't need to work. By their second, he had systematically isolated her from everyone, especially Tina, whose disapproval of him was obvious from the start. "Your sister thinks she's better than me," he'd said after their last explosive argument. "She's jealous of what we have. She'll try to poison you against me." Now, after 3 years of marriage, Sylvia lived in a gilded cage, a luxurious prison of marble floors and crystal chandeliers, monitored by security cameras that tracked her every movement, her phone and computer regularly inspected, her credit, her cards and bank accounts controlled entirely by Stefan. "One more thing," Stefan said, reaching into his pocket and producing a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond bracelet that glittered under the closet lights. "A gift, so everyone can see how well I take care of my wife." The unspoken message was clear. "Look at all I give you. You're nothing without me." "It's beautiful," Sylvia said, the expected response rolling off her tongue automatically as he fastened it around her wrist, right over the fading fingerprint bruises his grip had left there last week. "The car will be here in 5 minutes," he said, checking his watch. "Don't keep me waiting." When he left, Sylvia exhaled shakily, allowing herself one moment of honest emotion before the night's performance began. In the mirror, a ghost of her former self stared back, still beautiful but hollow-eyed, thin from the stress and Stefan's constant remarks about her weight, her once vibrant auburn hair now carefully styled to his specifications. Her gaze fell on her phone, sitting on the vanity. It was the 3rd one this year, the previous 2 having met unfortunate accidents when Stefan discovered communications he disapproved of. This one was monitored with tracking software that reported her location, calls and messages directly to him. There was only one number she desperately wanted to call, the one person who might still be able to help her. Tina, her twin sister, her other half, now CEO of their rebranded company, Ramsey Couture. While Sylvia had been disappearing into this nightmare, Tina had flourished, turning their small fashion house into one of the fastest-growing brands in the country. From the rare glimpses Sylvia caught of her sister in business magazines or society pages, Tina seemed to have grown even more confident and powerful, everything Sylvia once was. They hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since Stefan had accidentally shattered her previous phone, after discovering a text from Tina asking too many questions about a bruise she'd noticed in a photo from a charity event. The distance between them now felt insurmountable. What would her successful, strong-willed sister think of what she had become? How could she explain that leaving wasn't as simple as walking out the door, not when Stefan had made it explicitly clear what would happen if she tried? "I would find you," he'd whispered one night after a particularly vicious episode, stroking her tear-stained face with deceptive tenderness, "and I would destroy everyone who helped you, starting with your precious sister." A soft ping from her phone interrupted her thoughts. A notification from the security system that their car had arrived. Sylvia quickly dabbed away a stray tear, reapplied her lipstick and straightened her shoulders. Tonight would be like all the others, smiling at strangers while silently screaming for help, playing the adoring wife while planning impossible escapes. She took one last look at herself, at the stranger she had become, before walking out, to meet her husband, the gilded cage door swinging shut behind her with the quiet finality of a tomb. Across the city, in a sleek, high-rise office, Tina Ramsey stood at the window overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline, a strange heaviness in her chest that she couldn't explain. She rubbed absently at her wrist, feeling phantom pain in the exact spot where, unknown to her, her twin sister's skin was being encircled by diamonds that disguised bruises underneath. Chapter 2. Breaking Point. The Harrington Cancer Research Gala was in full swing. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel transformed into a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over Manhattan's elite as they sipped champagne and pretended to care about pediatric cancer research while really focusing on business connections and social climbing. Sylvia stood by Stefan's side, her practiced, smile never wavering as he charmed Robert Anderson, CEO of Anderson Technologies. Her emerald dress caught the light as she nodded at appropriate intervals, playing her part flawlessly. 3 years of marriage to Stefan had taught her the choreography of these events: when to smile, when to laugh, when to touch his arm affectionately, when to excuse herself so the men could talk business. "Your wife is absolutely delightful, Stefan," Mrs. Anderson said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I was just telling Sylvia she must join our women's charity committee. We need young blood with her sense of style." Stefan's hand tightened, almost imperceptibly around Sylvia's waist. "That's a lovely offer, but I'm afraid Sylvia's schedule is quite full with our own foundation work." Translation: no new connections allowed, no independence permitted. "Perhaps we could discuss it over lunch sometime," Mrs. Anderson persisted, directing her words to Sylvia. Before Sylvia could respond, a young waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. "Would you care for a refresh, ma'am?" he asked, his eyes meeting Sylvia's briefly. She reached for a glass, accidentally brushing the server's fingers in the exchange. "Thank you," she said softly. The moment lasted mere seconds, but Stefan's piercing blue eyes missed nothing. His smile remained fixed, but Sylvia felt the atmosphere shift like a sudden drop in barometric pressure before a violent storm. "Darling, would you check with the coordinator about our table assignment?" Stefan said, his voice pleasant but leaving. No room for refusal. I believe there was some confusion. As Sylvia walked away, she felt Stefan's gaze boring into her back. She'd committed an unforgivable sin in his eyes, making eye contact with another man, accepting his attention. However, briefly, the rest of the evening unfolded in slow-motion torture. Stefan was the perfect gentleman publicly, attentive, charming, generous with his checkbook when the donations were called for. But Sylvia could read the signs that no one else could. The slight twitch in his jaw, the way he kept her just a fraction closer than normal, the calculated gleam in his eyes that promised retribution. By the time they slipped into the back of their chauffeur-driven Bentley 3 hours later, Sylvia's nerves were frayed to breaking point. "Did you enjoy the attention?" Stefan asked as soon as the privacy partition closed, his voice eerily calm. "I don't know what you mean," Sylvia replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The waiter," he said, removing his cufflinks methodically. "You were flirting with him. I simply thanked him for the champagne." She tried to keep her voice steady, knowing from experience that both denial and apology could escalate his anger. "Don't lie to me." His words sliced through the air like a blade. "I saw the way you looked at him. Stefan, please." The first blow caught her wrist as she raised her arm instinctively to protect her face. Pain exploded through her arm as something cracked. Sylvia gasped, cradling her wrist against her chest as tears sprang to her eyes. 3 years, he hissed, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at him. 3 years I've given you everything. And this is how you repay me, by humiliating me in public? I wasn't— Shut up. His grip tightened. "When we get home, you're going to call Mrs. Anderson and decline her offer. You'll tell her you're not feeling well and need to rest for the coming weeks, and then you're going to remember exactly who you belong to." The rest of the ride passed in terrifying silence. Sylvia stared out the window, cradling her injured wrist, watching the city lights blur through her tears. This wasn't the first time he'd hurt her, but something was different tonight. The pain in her wrist throbbed in time, with a new resolve forming in her mind. This had to end. The penthouse was dark and silent when they arrived home, the staff dismissed for the night, as was Stefan's preference when he was angry. He disappeared into his study while Sylvia slipped into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. A small defiance that would cost her if he tried the handle. She gasped when she removed her gloves and saw her wrist. Already swollen, a dark bruise blossoming across the delicate bones. Tentatively, she tried to rotate it, biting her lip to stifle a cry of pain. Broken, most likely. She'd need a doctor, but Stefan only allowed her to see his hand-picked physician who would never report signs of abuse. As she fumbled in the medicine cabinet for painkillers with her good hand, Sylvia caught sight of her reflection. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, beautiful in an empty, carefully maintained way, but with dead eyes. When had she become this hollow shell? When had she accepted that this was all she deserved? A memory surfaced of Tina's voice from their last conversation. "He's isolating you, Sylvia. You. That's what abusers do. Please, let me help you." Stefan had smashed her phone minutes after discovering that call. But now, as Sylvia stood in the marble bathroom of her gilded prison, she realized she had one chance. Stefan's business phone, the one he never let out of his sight except when he showered, was sitting on his desk. He'd been drinking heavily at the gala, which meant he'd soon follow his usual routine, a shower, a nightcap, then sleep aided by the prescription pills he thought she didn't know about. She had maybe a 30-minute window. It took 20 excruciating minutes before she heard the shower running. Moving silently despite the agony in her wrist, Sylvia crept into his study. The phone sat on the polished mahogany desk, its screen dark. Her heart nearly stopped when she realized it would require his fingerprint to unlock. But there was one feature that didn't, the emergency call function. With trembling fingers, she pressed the emergency button, then cancelled before it could connect. From there, she could dial any number. Tina had made her memorize her private line years ago, insisting it was important to always have a direct connection between them. The phone rang 3 times before a sleep-roughened voice answered. "Who is this?" "Tina," Sylvia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's me. I need help." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Sylvia, where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm at the penthouse. He broke my wrist tonight. I can't do this anymore. I'm afraid he's going to kill me." "Listen to me." Tina's voice was suddenly alert, focused. "I'm coming to get you. Pack nothing. Take nothing. Just be ready to leave. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "You don't understand," Sylvia said desperately, hearing the shower shut off. "The security system, the doorman. He'll never let me leave." "Trust me," Tina said with steel in her voice. "I'm coming for you. We'll figure it out. Just stay alive until I get there." The sound of Stefan moving in the bedroom sent panic coursing through Sylvia. "I have to go," she whispered, ending the call and replacing the phone exactly as she'd found it. She made it back to the bathroom, just as Stefan emerged from the bedroom in his robe. Their eyes met briefly in the hallway, and she saw the calculation. There, the cruel anticipation. "Don't take too long," he said, his gaze drifting to her injured wrist. "We have unfinished business tonight." Sylvia nodded silently, slipping past him into the bathroom. As she closed the door, a strange calm settled over her. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than fear. Hope. Across town, Tina Ramsey was already in motion. Dressed in black jeans and a leather jacket, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, she loaded a small handgun into her purse and dialed a number she'd hoped never to need. "James," she said when the call connected. "It's time. Bring the car around and alert Dr. Chen. We're getting my sister tonight." Chapter 3. The Exchange. The sleek black Audi pulled up to the service entrance of Stefan Dan's luxury apartment building at exactly 3:17 a.m. Tina Ramsey sat in the passenger seat, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her phone as she tapped out a message. "We're here," she said to the driver, a broad-shouldered man with vigilant eyes that constantly scanned their surroundings. "Remember the plan, James. If we're not back in 15 minutes, I come in after you. Security protocols be damned, James." Ellis finished, his deep voice carrying the faint trace of a military background. As Tina's head of security for the past 4 years, he'd protected her from corporate espionage, overzealous fans, and the occasional stalker. But tonight was different. Tonight was personal. The night guard is Adams, Tina said, checking her reflection in the mirror and adjusting her appearance to match her sister's. He's worked here for years. He'll recognize me as Sylvia's twin. And if Dan wakes up? James asked, his hand resting near the concealed weapon under his jacket. Tina's eyes hardened. Then we'll finally have a proper introduction. The night guard recognized her immediately, his eyes widening at the late-hour visit. Miss Ramsey, is everything all right? Family emergency, Tina said, her smile tight. My mother's in the hospital. I need to take Sylvia to see her immediately. It was a calculated risk. Stefan monitored the building's security footage regularly, but never in real time at this hour. By the time he discovered this conversation, it would be too late. Adams frowned. Mr. Dan usually calls down when he's expecting visitors. It's an emergency, Tina repeated, letting a calculated tear slip down her cheek. Please, I just need to see my sister. The guard hesitated, then nodded, buzzing her through. Penthouse floor. I hope your mother recovers quickly, Ma'am. The elevator ride to the top floor felt eternal. When the doors finally slid open, Tina moved silently down the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't seen Sylvia in 8 months, not since Stefan had accidentally disconnected their last video call when he caught them speaking too freely. She knocked softly at the penthouse door, 3 gentle taps, followed by 2 quick ones. There, a childhood signal. The door opened almost immediately. Sylvia stood in the doorway, her face pale, her injured wrist cradled against her chest. The sisters stared at each other for a long, charged moment. Identical faces, mirror images separated by a gulf of suffering. You came? Sylvia whispered, her voice fragile with disbelief. I'll always come for you, Tina said fiercely, pulling her sister into a gentle embrace. Where is he? Sleeping, Sylvia replied, glancing nervously toward the master bedroom. The pills he takes will keep him out for another hour at least. Tina followed her sister's gaze, a cold fury settling in her chest at the sight of Sylvia's wrist, swollen, bruised, clearly broken. We need to get you to a doctor. I can't just leave, Sylvia said, panic edging into her voice. He'll find me. He has private investigators, connections with the police. He's threatened to destroy you if I ever tried to... Shh, Tina soothed, guiding her sister to sit on the sofa. I have a plan, but you need to trust me completely. In the dim light of the penthouse, Tina outlined her strategy, a plan born of desperation and rage that had been forming in her mind for months. We're going to switch places, she said simply. Sylvia stared at her in confusion. What? You'll go back with James to my penthouse. Dr. Chen is waiting there to treat your wrist. Off the record, no questions asked. You'll stay there, protected. While I remain here as you. Horror dawned on Sylvia's face. No, absolutely not. You don't know what he's capable of. I've seen enough. Tina countered, her voice hard as she gestured to Sylvia's injured wrist. And I'm not afraid of him. Besides, I need time to gather evidence of his crimes, access his accounts, build a case that will destroy him so thoroughly he'll never threaten either of us again. He'll know, Sylvia protested weakly. He notices everything. He notices the trained responses he's beaten into you, Tina corrected grimly. Not the actual you, not anymore. I've been studying him for years, Sylvia. I know his business, his patterns, his weaknesses. I can play the role of submissive wife long enough to dismantle everything he's built. Sylvia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I can't let you put yourself in danger. He's a monster, Tina. And monsters can be killed, Tina replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. But first, they must be trapped. She took Sylvia's hands carefully in hers. You've endured his hell for 3 years. Let me take your place for just a few weeks. Let me be the sword you were never allowed to wield. A sound from the bedroom froze them both. Sylvia's eyes widened in terror, but the noise subsided. Just. Stefan turning in his drug-induced sleep. Time was running out. "What about your company?" Sylvia asked desperately. "You can't just disappear. I've arranged everything. My executive team thinks I'm taking a mental health retreat at an exclusive spa in Switzerland. No phones, no contact for at least a month. Only James knows the truth." Tina squeezed her sister's hands gently. "This is the only way, Sylvia. Let me help you. Let me be you, so that you can remember who you really are." Something shifted in Sylvia's eyes, a spark of the woman she'd been before Stefan had systematically destroyed her spirit. "How will we do it?" Relief flooded through Tina. "Quickly!" She pulled a small bag from her jacket pocket. "Change clothes with me, take my phone, my ID, leave everything else behind, especially anything he might have put trackers in." The sisters moved with the synchronicity that had defined their relationship since childhood. Within minutes, they had exchanged clothes, Tina carefully styling her hair to match Sylvia's current look, while Sylvia pulled her own hair back in the sleek ponytail Tina favored. "There's a camera in the hallway and the elevator," Sylvia warned, her good hand trembling as she fastened Tina's watch around her wrist. "If he reviews the footage, he'll see me arriving and you leaving. Just two sisters saying goodbye after a brief late-night visit," Tina finished. "The night guard already believes our mother is ill. It's a plausible scenario." As they completed the transformation, Tina gently touched the bruise on Sylvia's face. "I'm going to make him pay for every mark, every tear, every moment of fear," she promised, her voice low and deadly. "When I'm done, Stefan Dan will wish he'd never heard the name Ramsey." Sylvia embraced her sister fiercely. "Be careful. He keeps a gun in his nightstand. The security code changes weekly. He'll tell you on Monday. The housekeeper comes at 9, his driver at 8:30. There are cameras everywhere except the bathrooms and the bedroom." Tina nodded, absorbing every detail. "James is waiting downstairs. Go now, while we still have time." At the door, Sylvia hesitated one last time. "What if something goes wrong? Then I'll tear down the walls of hell to get back to you," Tina promised. "Now go, be free." As the door closed behind Sylvia, Tina stood alone in the penthouse that had been her sister's prison. The enormity of what she'd just done, what she was about to do, washed over her. She was now in the predator's den, alone with the monster. Taking a deep breath, she walked silently to the master bedroom and pushed open the door. In the king-sized bed lay Stefan Dan, his handsome face relaxed in sleep, looking nothing like the demon her sister had described. But Tina knew better than to trust appearances. She approached the bed slowly, studying the man who had systematically broken her twin. In sleep, she could see the flecks of muscles beneath his t-shirt, the strength that had been used to terrorize, rather than protect. On the nightstand lay his phone, wallet, and a small key fob she recognized as a biometric security device for his private files. Next to them, partially concealed under a book, was the handle of a matte black handgun. Tina carefully slid into the empty side of the bed, maintaining as much distance as possible between them. Her skin crawled at the thought of lying next to him, but this was war, and she would endure whatever necessary to win it. As if sensing a presence, Stefan stirred slightly, his arm reaching out across the sheets until his hand found her hip. Even in sleep, his grip was possessive, controlling. "Sylvia," he murmured groggily, his eyes still closed. Tina forced herself to remain still, fighting every instinct to recoil from his touch. "I'm here," she whispered, perfectly mimicking her sister's subdued tone. Satisfied, he drifted back to deeper sleep, his breathing evening out once more. In the darkness, Tina's eyes gleamed with cold determination. The exchange was complete. The trap was set. Now the hunt would begin. Across the city, in the back of a speeding Audi, Sylvia leaned against the window, watching the familiar prison of Manhattan's skyline recede in the distance. For the first time in 3 years, she drew a full breath, one not constricted by fear. "She'll be okay, won't she?" she asked James, who drove with focused precision through the deserted streets. The security chief's eyes met hers briefly in the rearview mirror. "Your sister is the strongest person I know," he said simply, "and now she has something worth fighting for." Sylvia nodded, cradling her broken wrist. The pain was excruciating, but for the first time in years, it carried a promise of healing, rather than simply more suffering to come. As dawn broke over the city, casting golden light across the skyscrapers, two identical women in two different parts of Manhattan prepared for the roles they would play in the destruction of Stefan Dan. One fueled by newfound freedom, the other by righteous vengeance. The game had begun. Chapter 4. Double Lives, Sylvia. Woke with a start, heart racing, arm instinctively raised to protect her face. It took several disorienting moments to realize she wasn't in Stefan's penthouse. The bedroom surrounding her was minimalist but elegant. Cream walls, floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of Central Park, and a king-sized bed with sheets softer than anything she'd felt in years. Tina's penthouse, Tina's bed, Tina's life. She glanced down at her wrist, now properly set and wrapped in a sleek black brace after Dr. Chen's midnight treatment. The pain had dulled to a persistent throb, managed by the prescription medication on the nightstand. Freedom felt foreign, almost frightening in its unfamiliarity. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Ms. Ramsey?" a deep voice called. "Are you awake?" James Ellis, Tina's head of security, the man who had driven her away from her prison the night before, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror to ensure they weren't followed. "Yes," she called, her voice still carrying the whisper-soft quality that Stefan had demanded. "Come in." James entered, carrying a tray with breakfast and coffee. He moved with the fluid precision of someone who maintained complete awareness of his surroundings at all times. In the morning light, Sylvia could better appreciate his appearance. Tall and broad-shouldered with close-cropped dark hair, strong, features that looked as if they'd been carved from stone, and eyes that somehow managed to be both vigilant and kind. "Dr. Chen left instructions for your medication," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. 2 pills with food every 6 hours. His gaze flickered to her wrist. "How's the pain?" "Manageable," Sylvia replied automatically, the response she'd been conditioned to give regardless of her actual suffering. Something in James's expression told her he wasn't fooled. "There's no need to downplay your pain here, Ms. Ramsey. No one will punish you for being honest." His perception caught her off guard. She looked away, uncomfortable with being so easily read. "I've had worse." A shadow crossed his face, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "That's precisely the problem." He gestured to the breakfast tray. "You should eat. You'll need your strength." As Sylvia reached for the coffee with her good hand, she noticed the subtle scars across James's knuckles. Fighting scars. Her gaze traveled to the gun holstered discreetly beneath his jacket. "Were you always in security?" she asked, taking a careful sip of the perfectly prepared coffee, exactly how she liked it, though she couldn't remember telling him. "Special Forces first," he replied, moving to the windows to check the street below, a habitual motion. 8 years, 4 deployments, then private security for high-risk clients. "And how did you end up working for my sister?" He turned back to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "She offered me a job when no one else would. I was damaged goods after my last deployment." There was more to that story, Sylvia sensed. But he didn't elaborate. "Tina has always collected broken things," Sylvia said softly, more to herself than to him. James's eyes met hers with unexpected intensity. "You're not broken, Ms. Ramsey. Injured, yes. Traumatized, certainly. But not broken." The conviction in his voice made her throat tighten. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with genuine respect, rather than the false consideration Stefan's associates showed to his pretty, empty-headed wife. "Call me Sylvia, please," she said, "if we're going to be living in the same apartment while my sister risks her life pretending to be me. I think we can dispense with formalities." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Sylvia, then." She took a bite of toast, surprised to find herself genuinely hungry. "Do you think she's safe?" "Your sister is one of the most capable people I've ever met," James said, "and she's been preparing for this for longer than you know." "What do you mean?" James hesitated, then seemed to decide she deserved the truth. "Tina's been investigating Stefan for over a year. She has files, extensive ones, his business dealings, his associates, his patterns. She's been waiting for the right moment to move against him." Sylvia set down her cup with a trembling hand. She never said anything. "Would you have accepted her help a year ago?" James asked gently. "Or would you have defended him, made excuses, retreated further away from her?" The question cut through her like a blade. He was right. A year ago, she would have been too afraid, too ashamed, too convinced that Stefan's violence was somehow her fault. "I've been a coward," she whispered. "No," James said firmly. "You've been a survivor in an impossible situation. There's a difference." He moved away from the window and stood at the foot of the bed, his posture straight but not threatening. "Your sister left instructions. When you're ready, she'd like you to go through some of her current design projects. She thought it might help you remember who you were before." "I can't just pick up where I left off 3 years ago," Sylvia protested. "I haven't designed anything since Stefan convinced you your work was worthless," James finished, his voice gentle but unflinching. "That's exactly why Tina wants you to try." Before Sylvia could respond, a sharp, electronic tone sounded from James's watch. He checked it, his expression turning serious. "Security alert. Someone's trying to access Ms. Ramsey's private elevator." Panic flashed through Sylvia. "Stefan?" "No," James said, already moving toward the door, hand on his weapon. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." Heart pounding, Sylvia followed his instructions, pressing her ear against the door after securing the lock. She heard muffled voices, then what sounded like a brief struggle, followed by a woman's indignant tone. 5 minutes later, a knock came at the bedroom door. "It's all clear," James called, "but we have a situation." When Sylvia cautiously opened the door, she found James standing with an elegant African-American woman who was eyeing him with immense irritation. "Honestly, James, was the arm lock really necessary?" the woman demanded before turning to Sylvia with a shocked expression. "My God, it's true. You're really here." "Michelle Bennett," James introduced reluctantly, "Ms. Ramsey's executive assistant. And friend," Michelle added pointedly, moving forward to embrace Sylvia carefully, mindful of her injured wrist. "Tina told me everything this morning. I'm supposed to be covering for her absence, but I had to see for myself that you were okay." She pulled back, examining Sylvia with tears in her eyes. 8 months. That bastard kept you away from us for 8 months. Sylvia felt oddly exposed under Michelle's gaze, as if the woman could see every bruise, every scar, every piece of herself that had been chipped away during her marriage. "We can't trust anyone else with this information," James said firmly. "The fewer people who know, the safer both Ms. Ramsey and her sister will be." Michelle shot him a withering look. "I've been Tina's right hand for 5 years. I'm not about to jeopardize either of them." She turned back to Sylvia. "I brought clothes, makeup, some essentials, and I can help you navigate Tina's world while she's away." The reality of the situation suddenly overwhelmed Sylvia. Stefan would be waking up now, expecting breakfast, expecting obedience, expecting Sylvia. But instead, he would find Tina, her fierce, indomitable sister playing the role of submissive wife while secretly plotting his destruction. "I need to call her," Sylvia said urgently. James shook his head. "No contact for at least 3 days. Those are the protocols we established. It's too dangerous. But what if he hurts her? What if he discovers the truth?" The thought of Tina suffering even a fraction of what she had endured made Sylvia physically ill. "Your sister can handle herself," Michelle assured her, though concern flickered in her dark eyes. "In the meantime, we need to focus on getting you back on your feet, starting with this." She held up a tablet displaying the sketches for Ramsey, Couture's upcoming collection. "Tina needs your eye on these designs before they go to production next week." Sylvia stared at the screen, at the creative world she'd abandoned 3 years ago. Her fingers itched to trace the lines, to adjust. A seam here, add a detail there. The muscle memory of creation was still there, buried beneath years of fear. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. James's voice came from behind her, quiet but resolute. "You can, and while you remember how to create, I'm going to teach you something else." His eyes met hers with stern compassion. "How to fight back." "Self-defense?" Sylvia asked, glancing down at her broken wrist. "That's part of it," he nodded. "But more importantly, how to reclaim your power, so that no one, not even Stefan Dan, can ever take it from you again." For the first time since she'd fled her prison, Sylvia felt something besides fear or guilt or relief. It was small, but undeniable, a spark warming her from within. Hope, not just for escape, but for rebirth. Across the city, in the Dan penthouse, Tina Ramsey was discovering the full horror of her sister's existence. She stood motionless as Stefan circled her, inspecting her appearance before their scheduled brunch with his business associates. "The blue dress," he said finally, his voice deceptively soft. "And the sapphire earrings I bought you for our anniversary." His hand reached out to stroke her cheek, and it took every ounce of Tina's self-control not to flinch away from his touch. "How's your wrist this morning, darling?" "Better," she replied, perfectly mimicking Sylvia's subdued tone. His piercing blue eyes narrowed slightly, searching for any hint of defiance. Finding none, he smiled, that charming public smile that had fooled everyone except Tina for years. "Good," he said, his hand dropping to her throat in a caress that carried an unmistakable threat. "Because I need you to be at your best today. The Wilsons are key investors. You know how important first impressions are." "Of course," Tina murmured, lowering her eyes as she'd seen Sylvia do countless times in the society photographs she'd studied obsessively. As Stefan turned away, satisfied. With her submission, Tina's eyes hardened with cold fury. This was just the beginning. Soon, very soon, Stefan Dan would discover exactly who he was really dealing with, and by then, it would be far too late. Chapter 5. Awakening Desires. 2 weeks into her newfound freedom, Sylvia stood in Tina's home studio, surrounded by fabric, swatches, design sketches, and the creative chaos she had once thrived in. Her wrist, though still in a brace, had begun to heal, unlike the deeper wounds that still surfaced in nightmares that left her gasping and disoriented in the dark. But for the first time in 3 years, she was creating again. Her fingers traced the lines of a sketch she'd been working on since dawn, a gown that spoke of rebirth, with layers that transformed from confining at the bodice to liberated and flowing at the hem. It was raw, emotional work, each pencil stroke a form of therapy. "That's beautiful," a deep voice observed from the doorway. Sylvia didn't need to turn to know it was James. She'd become attuned to his presence over the past fortnight, the measured cadence of his footsteps, the subtle scent of sandalwood and gun oil that seemed to follow him, the feeling of absolute security that settled over her whenever he was near. "It's still rough," she said, setting down her pencil and stretching her cramped fingers. James approached, studying the sketch with genuine interest. He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, but not so close as to be intrusive. He'd been careful about that from the beginning, always telegraphing his movements, never crowding her, respecting the invisible boundaries of someone who had endured what she had. "It tells a story," he said, surprising her with his perception. Constraint to freedom. Sylvia looked up at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "I wouldn't have taken you for a fashion connoisseur." The corner of his mouth quirked upward, one of those rare, almost smiles that had become something of a victory to elicit. "4 sisters," he explained. "I learned more about fashion than any special forces training could prepare me for." These small revelations about his life outside of work had become precious to Sylvia. Each one felt like a gift, a piece of trust extended to her when she had so little to offer in return. "Time for your session," he said, gesturing toward the penthouse's private gym where they'd been conducting her self-defense training. Sylvia nodded, setting aside her work. The daily training sessions had quickly become the cornerstone of her new routine. They weren't just about physical techniques, though she'd learned plenty, even with her injured wrist, but about reclaiming agency over her body and space. Into the gym, James had set up the usual training mats and was removing his suit jacket and shoulder holster, leaving him in a fitted black t-shirt that revealed the lean muscle of his arms and the scars that told their own stories of survival. "How's the wrist today?" he asked as she took her position on the mat. "Better," she replied, demonstrating her increased range of motion. "Dr. Chen said I'm healing faster than expected." James nodded approvingly. "Then we'll work on your non-dominant and techniques today. Remember, in a real confrontation, you use whatever advantages you have." As they moved through the exercises, Sylvia found herself increasingly aware of James in ways that had nothing to do with self-defense. The careful precision of his movements, the controlled strength in his hands when he demonstrated a hold, the intensity in his eyes when he explained why a particular technique worked. "You're distracted today," he observed, as he easily countered her attempted wrist escape. Heat rose to Sylvia's cheeks. "I didn't sleep well." It wasn't a lie. The nightmares had been particularly vivid. Stefan finding her, Tina in danger, the walls closing in again. But it wasn't the entire truth either. It wasn't a lie. The nightmares had been particularly vivid. Stefan finding her, Tina in danger, the walls closing in again. But it wasn't the entire truth either. James stepped back, studying her with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see everything she tried to hide. The nightmares again. Sylvia nodded, rubbing her arms as if suddenly cold. "It's always the same. He finds me. He hurts Tina. I'm trapped again." "Your mind is processing trauma," James said matter-of-factly, but not unkindly. "It's normal." "Normal," Sylvia repeated with a bitter laugh. "Nothing about this situation is normal." "No," he agreed, surprising her again with his honesty, "but your response to it is." He crossed to the small refrigerator in the corner of the gym and retrieved 2 water bottles, handing one to her. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, sending an unexpected jolt through Sylvia's system. She looked away quickly, unsettled by her reaction. "Tell me about your training," she said impulsively, seeking safer ground. "How you became this." She gestured vaguely at all of him, the warrior contained in civilian clothing. James was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had a different quality to it, more personal, less guarded. "I enlisted. At 18, needed direction, structure, found I had a talent for certain skills." He took a drink of water, his gaze distant. 8 years, 4 deployments, the last one went bad. The simple statement contained worlds of unspoken pain. Sylvia waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. Hostage extraction in Yemen. Intelligence was compromised. "We walked into an ambush," His hand unconsciously touched a spot on his side where Sylvia had glimpsed a jagged scar during their training. 3 of my team didn't make it out. I barely did. I'm sorry, Sylvia said softly, resisting the unexpected urge to reach. For his hand, James shook his head slightly. After that, I wasn't fit for service, physically or mentally. Honorable discharge, medals that didn't mean anything, and no idea how to exist in the civilian world. How did you end up working for Tina? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Your sister found me working security at a nightclub. I was 6 months out of the hospital, dealing with PTSD by not sleeping and drinking too much when I did. She was attending some fashion event there, and one of the guests got too aggressive with her. Sylvia could imagine the scene perfectly. Tina, a proud and fierce, facing down some entitled man. I intervened, James continued, not very gracefully, probably used more force than necessary. He rubbed the scars on his knuckles absently. The next day, she tracked me down, offered me a job, said she needed someone who wouldn't hesitate to protect her, even if it meant making a scene. That sounds like Tina, Sylvia said with a small smile. She saved my life, James said simply, gave me purpose again, something to protect. The raw honesty in his voice struck Sylvia deeply. Here was someone who understood what it meant to be broken and remade, who knew the value of being seen when at your worst. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. Now you're helping save mine. The moment between them shifted, charged with something neither was prepared to name. James looked down at her hand on his arm, then up to her. Your face, his eyes asking a question he wouldn't voice. Sylvia withdrew her hand, suddenly self-conscious. I should shower before the meeting with Michelle about the new designs. James nodded, professional distance reasserting itself. Of course. I'll be outside when you're ready. Later that evening, Sylvia sat on the balcony of Tina's penthouse, wrapped in a cashmere throw against the autumn chill. The lights of Manhattan glittered below, a view she'd once appreciated from behind the glass walls of her prison with Stefan. Now she could feel the night air on her skin, breathe deeply without fear of criticism or punishment. The sliding door opened behind her, and James stepped out with 2 steaming mugs. Thought you might like some tea, he said, offering her one. Thank you. She accepted it gratefully, inhaling the familiar scent of chamomile and lavender. How had he known her favorite blend? James took the seat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the city lights shimmer against the darkness. No word from Tina yet? Sylvia asked, though she knew the answer. 3 days had turned into 2 weeks, with only one cryptic text message to confirm her sister was alive and continuing the charade. Michelle received coded confirmation in the company reports this morning, James replied. Your sister is still in position, still gathering evidence. Sylvia nodded, clutching the mug tighter. I should be there. It should be me risking everything, not her. You did that for 3 years, James reminded her gently. Now it's her turn to fight for you. I wasn't fighting, Sylvia whispered. I was surviving. There's a difference. Sometimes surviving is the hardest fight of all. The quiet conviction in his voice made her look up, meeting his gaze in the dim light. In that moment, something passed between them, recognition, understanding, a shared knowledge of what it meant to endure when all you wanted was to surrender. Without conscious thought, Sylvia found herself moving closer to him, drawn by the warmth and security he represented. James remained perfectly still, allowing her to set the pace, to determine the boundaries. When she placed her hand tentatively on his, he turned his palm upward, his fingers curling gently around hers. I haven't, she began, her voice catching. Since before Stefan, I haven't felt... I know, he said quietly. You don't need to. Explain. But I want to, Sylvia insisted. I need you to understand what I'm offering isn't much. I'm still damaged, Still afraid, but when I'm with you I feel safe, I feel seen. James's thumb traced a delicate pattern across her knuckles. We're all damaged in our own ways. It doesn't make us any less worthy of connection. The tenderness in his touch, so different from the calculated cruelty she'd known for years, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. James reached up slowly, telegraphing his movement, and brushed them away with a gentleness that broke something open inside her. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the distant city sounds. Sylvia nodded, understanding the question without words. James leaned forward, giving her every chance to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so carefully, restrained, so respectful of her fragility, that Sylvia felt herself breaking and healing simultaneously. Her hand moved to his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they finally pulled apart, Sylvia saw in his eyes the same wonder she felt, the surprise of finding connection when both had believed themselves too broken for such things. "I won't rush you," James promised. "We have time." Sylvia nodded, resting her head against his shoulder as they turned back to the glittering cityscape. For the first time since escaping Stefan's control, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival, one where healing wasn't just possible, but inevitable, where broken pieces could form something new and perhaps even more beautiful than before. Across the city, in the cold opulence of Stefan Dan's penthouse, Tina stood in Sylvia's closet, methodically searching for any hidden cameras her preliminary sweeps might have missed. 2 weeks of playing the perfect submissive wife had yielded valuable intelligence, access to Stefan's private study, glimpses of his financial records, and most disturbing of all, evidence of connections to offshore accounts linked to human trafficking operations. The monster her sister had married was worse than even Tina had suspected. Her phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Michelle. "Designs approved, eagle thriving in nest." Tina allowed herself a small smile at the goaded confirmation that Sylvia was safe and even flourishing under James's protection. The knowledge steeled her resolve for what was to come. The bathroom door opened, and Stefan emerged in a cloud of steam, a towel wrapped around his waist. Tina forced herself not to tense as he approached, slipping into Sylvia's mannerisms with practiced ease. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, his fingers trailing along her neck in what might appear to be an affectionate gesture but carried an unmistakable threat. "Wear the red dress. Senator Hawkins appreciates a woman who knows how to present herself properly." "Of course," Tina replied softly, reaching for the dress he indicated. Stefan caught her wrist, his grip just tight enough to hurt. "You've been different these past 2 weeks," he said, his piercing blue eyes searching hers. "More compliant." "I like it." Tina lowered her gaze, hiding the fury that threatened to expose her. "I just want to make you happy." "Good girl," he murmured, releasing her wrist and turning away. As soon as his back was turned, Tina's eyes hardened with cold determination. Soon, very soon, she would have everything she needed to destroy him completely. And when she did, Stefan Dan would learn just how dangerous it was to have earned the hatred of both Ramsey sisters. The countdown to his destruction had begun. Chapter 6. The Hunter's Trap. 3 weeks into her infiltration, Tina sat at Sylvia's vanity, meticulously applying makeup to match her sister's preferred style. Tonight was critical. Stefan was hosting a private dinner for his most exclusive business partners, men whose criminal enterprises were carefully disguised behind legitimate corporate facades. The bedroom door opened without a knock. Stefan never bothered with such courtesies in his own home, and he appeared in the doorway, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "You look perfect," he said, his piercing blue eyes skimming over her reflection with possessive approval. "Remember, these men expect discretion above all. Senator Hartwell will be bringing his mistress, not his wife. You will notice nothing unusual Of course, Tina murmured, lowering her eyes as Sylvia would have, and the Karagian brothers are easily offended. Speak only when spoken to. He approached behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders, his thumbs pressing into the sensitive hollow above her collarbone with deliberate pressure. I've been pleased with your behavior these past weeks. Perhaps that unfortunate incident at the gala taught you something valuable after all. Tina bit the inside of her cheek to keep from revealing her rage. The unfortunate incident had left her sister with a broken wrist and years of psychological scars. I only want to make you happy, she replied, the practiced response bitter on her tongue. Stefan smiled, satisfied with her submission. Good. I have something for you. He reached into his pocket and produced a diamond necklace, ostentatious, heavy and unmistakably like a collar. A reward for your improved attitude. As he fastened it around her neck, Tina forced herself to smile appreciatively at the symbol of ownership. It's beautiful, thank you. I have a business call to finish. Before our guests arrive, be ready in the living room in 20 minutes. His hand trailed possessively down her spine before he left, closing the door behind him. The moment he was gone, Tina's expression hardened into focused determination. 20 minutes was all she needed. She moved quickly to Stefan's study, using the key fob she had secretly duplicated during her second week. The electronic lock disengaged with a soft click, and she slipped inside, careful not to disturb anything from its precise position. Stefan's laptop sat closed on his immaculate desk. Tina removed a specially designed flash drive from a hidden compartment in her lipstick tube, one of several gadgets Michelle had provided. She inserted it into the laptop, watching as proprietary software bypassed security protocols and began copying encrypted files. While the drive did its work, Tina carefully photographed documents from Stefan's safe using her modified watch. Banking statements, contracts with blacked-out sections, and most damning of all, ledgers tracking payments to officials in countries known for lax human trafficking. Enforcement. The software notification blinked, 89% complete. Time was running out. Footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. Stefan was returning early. Tina quickly closed the safe, positioned herself at Stefan's desk chair, and picked up a silver-framed photo of him and Sylvia at a charity gala. A picture that had always made her stomach turn at her sister's haunted eyes. The door opened. "What are you doing in here?" Stefan's voice was dangerously soft. Tina looked up with carefully manufactured embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I was just..." She gestured to the photograph with calculated vulnerability. "I was thinking about how handsome you looked that night. I wanted to see it again." Suspicion warred with vanity in Stefan's expression. Vanity won. "You should have asked permission to enter my office," he said, but the edge had left his voice. "I didn't want to interrupt your call." Tina rose, moving toward him with the demure grace Sylvia had adopted. "Forgive me?" Behind her back, she palmed the flash drive, slipping it back into its hiding place as she reached up to straighten Stefan's already perfect tie. The practiced gesture of subservience disgusted her, but it achieved its purpose. Stefan's posture relaxed. "Don't let it happen again," he said, taking her arm to lead her from the room. "Our guests will be arriving shortly." As they walked toward the living room, Tina could feel the weight of the stolen information like a weapon against her skin. Every file, every transaction record, every incriminating email was another nail in Stefan Dan's coffin. The dinner proceeded exactly as most evenings in Stefan's world did. Powerful men discussing their enterprises in coded language, beautiful women serving as decorative accessories, and undercurrents of corruption flowing beneath polite conversation. Tina played her role flawlessly, speaking only when addressed, laughing at the right moments, refilling Stefan's glass without being asked. All the while she was cataloguing faces, names, and the unguarded comments that slipped out as the alcohol flowed freely. "Your wife is exquisite, Dan," remarked Victor Karagian, his accent thick, but his English perfect. "So different from when I saw her at the Monaco benefit, much more composed." Tina felt Stefan's attention sharpen beside her. "Monaco?" he queried, his tone casual but his fingers tightening around his whiskey glass. "I don't recall us attending a Monaco benefit." Ice slid down Tina's spine. "A trap." Victor waved his hand, dismissively. "Perhaps I am mistaken. So many faces at these events. But the damage was done." Across the table, Tina saw Senator Hartwell studying her with new interest, his gaze moving between her and Stefan with dawning comprehension. Later, as the guests departed, Tina braced herself for Stefan's reaction. He remained silent until the door closed behind the last visitor, then turned to her with cold calculation in his eyes. "Monaco," he said softly. "Interesting choice, Victor, considering Sylvia has never been to Monaco." Tina maintained her composure, though her heart raced. "He must have confused me with someone else." "Perhaps." Stefan moved closer, reaching out to touch the diamond necklace at her throat, his fingers lingering there. Or perhaps he recognized Tina Ramsey when he saw her. For a suspended moment, fear crystallized in Tina's chest. Had her cover been blown? Had she underestimated Stefan's network of informants? Then Stefan laughed, the sound genuinely amused. "Ridiculous, of course. The idea that my docile little wife could be replaced by her shark of a sister." His hand moved from the necklace to cup her cheek, the gesture deceptively tender. "You'd never betray me like that, would you, darling?" "Never," Tina whispered, holding his gaze with practiced submission. "Good girl," he murmured, apparently satisfied. "Go prepare for bed. I'll join you shortly." As Tina walked away, she could feel his piercing blue eyes on her back, assessing, calculating. The hunter was growing suspicious, but the trap was already set. She had what she needed: evidence of his crimes, connections to his network, access to his financial back doors. Now, she just needed to spring the trap before Stefan realized he was the one being hunted. Chapter 7. Dangerous Revelations. "Again," James instructed, circling Sylvia as she executed a perfect escape from a wrist grab. "Faster this time. In a real situation, you won't have time to think." Sylvia nodded, her focus absolute, as she repeated the maneuver, using her recovered strength and James's momentum against him. 5 weeks of daily training had transformed her, not just physically, but in the way she carried herself, the confidence in her movements, the spark that had returned to her eyes. "Better," James approved, a rare smile softening his features. "Your form is excellent." Sylvia returned his smile, the ease of it still surprising after years of carefully modulating every expression. "I had a good teacher." The air between them charged with unspoken tension, a familiar occurrence these past weeks as their relationship evolved beyond protector and protected. Their connection had deepened in ways neither had anticipated, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared understanding of trauma, and an attraction that grew more difficult to ignore with each passing day. "One more," James said, his voice rougher than usual. "Defense against a frontal attack." He moved toward her deliberately, telegraphing his intentions as he always did during training. Sylvia executed the defensive move flawlessly, using his forward momentum to guide him past her while maintaining her balance. "Perfect," he said, his breath warm against her neck as they ended in close proximity. "You're a natural." Sylvia turned to face him, suddenly aware of how little space remained between them. "Is that your professional assessment, Mr. Ellis?" James's eyes darkened at her teasing tone. "Very professional," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips before he stepped back, maintaining the boundaries they'd silently agreed upon. Their relationship existed in a delicate balance: tender moments, balanced with careful distance, passionate. Kisses, followed by mutual retreat. James never pushed for more, understanding that Sylvia's journey back to herself required patience and space. And Sylvia, though increasingly certain of her feelings, was still learning to trust her own desires. After years of suppression, the intercom buzzed, breaking the moment. "Package delivery for Ms. Ramsey," announced the front desk security. James immediately tensed, his hand moving subtly toward his concealed weapon. "We're not expecting anything." Sylvia's stomach clenched with sudden anxiety. "Could it be from Tina?" "Stay here," James instructed, moving toward the security panel. "I'll handle this." 15 minutes later, he returned carrying a sleek black box with no return address or identifying marks. "It's been scanned. No explosives, no electronic devices." Sylvia approached cautiously, drawn by equal measures of hope and dread. "It could be from Stefan. He could have found me." "Only one way to know," James said, placing the box on the coffee table between them. With trembling fingers, Sylvia lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in black tissue paper, lay a USB drive and a folded note in Tina's distinctive handwriting. "The game is changing. Stay vigilant." James immediately secured the drive, moving to Tina's home office where a specialized computer was set up for secure communications. Sylvia followed, her heart racing with fear for her twin. She wouldn't risk direct contact unless something was wrong, Sylvia said, as James inserted the drive. The screen filled with encrypted files, photographs and financial records, evidence of Stefan's criminal enterprises that Tina had been methodically gathering. But it was the video file that drew their attention. Tina's face appeared, recorded in what appeared to be the bathroom of Stefan's penthouse, one of the few places without surveillance. Her expression was tense, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sylvia, James, Stefan's growing suspicious. Yesterday's dinner with his partners triggered something. I've gathered enough evidence to destroy his operation, but I need more time to ensure it reaches the right authorities. His network includes federal judges, 2 senators, and law enforcement officials. We can't trust the normal channels." Sylvia gasped, her hand covering her mouth in horror. "More importantly," Tina continued, her voice steadying with determination, "I've discovered something about his inner circle. They're not just trafficking luxury goods or laundering money. It's people, Sylvia, young women primarily, brought in through his shipping companies and distributed through his hotel properties." James's expression hardened, his military background evident in the cold calculation that entered his eyes. "I'm sending this evidence to our secure server, but I need you both to be careful. Stefan mentioned hiring private investigators this morning, ostensibly to look into a business rival, but I suspect he's looking for you. He's keeping me closer than ever, watching for any slip." Tina glanced over her shoulder, checking her limited privacy. "I need 3 more days to finish this. Stay safe. Trust no one outside our immediate circle." The video ended abruptly, leaving Sylvia and James in stunned silence. "He's dealing in human trafficking," Sylvia finally whispered, her face pale with shock. "All those charity galas for women's empowerment and he's—" Her voice broke. James's hand found hers, steadying her with his quiet strength. "Your sister needs to get out now. The evidence she's gathered is more than enough. She won't leave until she's certain he can't escape justice," Sylvia said, knowing her twin's determination matched her own. 3 days, she said. James was already moving, pulling out his phone to contact their small circle of trusted allies. 3 days, and then we extract her regardless. I'll have Michelle secure additional safe houses and alert Dr. Chen to be on standby. As James coordinated their response, Sylvia studied the photographs Tina had included, documents linking Stefan to offshore accounts, meetings with known criminals, and most damning of all, young women being escorted through service entrances. Of his hotels. The monster she had married was worse than she'd imagined. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it solidified something within Sylvia, a steel core of resolve where fear had once resided. "James," she said quietly, "I want to be there when we get her out." He turned to her, his expression grave. "That's not safe. If Stefan sees you—" "I need to be there," Sylvia insisted, meeting his gaze with unwavering determination. "She risked everything for me. I won't hide while she's still in danger." James studied her for a long moment, recognizing the transformation that had taken place over these weeks, the return of the woman who had been buried beneath years of abuse and control. "We'll create a secure extraction plan," he finally agreed. "But you follow my lead, without question." Sylvia nodded, relief and resolve mingling in her chest. "Thank you for understanding." Later that night, after securing the evidence and establishing communication protocols with Michelle, Sylvia found James on the balcony, his silhouette stark against the city lights as he gazed out with the vigilant focus of a sentinel. "You should rest," he said without turning, sensing her presence with the heightened awareness that was second nature to him. "So should you," she replied, moving to stand beside him. They stood in silence for several moments, the weight of Tina's revelations and the danger ahead creating a current of tension between them. "Before I was stationed in Yemen," James said, suddenly his voice low, "I worked with a specialized unit targeting human trafficking operations. I've seen what happens in those places." His hands gripped the balcony railing, knuckles whitening. "Stefan Dan isn't just a domestic abuser, he's a predator on a much larger scale." Sylvia heard the controlled fury in his voice, saw the way his jaw tightened with suppressed rage. "This is personal for you?" James nodded once, his gaze still fixed on the distant horizon. "My youngest sister went missing when she was 17. We found her 6 months later in one of those operations." He paused, the memory clearly painful. "She was never the same." Without hesitation, Sylvia reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers. No empty words of comfort, no platitudes, just connection, understanding, shared pain. "When this is over," she said quietly, "we make sure he never hurts anyone again, not just for me or Tina or the women in those photographs, for your sister too." James turned to her then, something shifting in his expression, a recognition of the warrior spirit that had awakened within her, matching his own. "When this is over," he agreed, his free hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face with unexpected tenderness. "We ensure he faces justice. All of them do." In the quiet intimacy of that moment, with danger closing in, and the future uncertain, Sylvia made a decision. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his, no longer tentative or restrained, but with passionate certainty. James responded instantly, his arms encircling her with protective strength as he deepened the kiss, months of controlled desire finally given freedom. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, the connection between them had transformed, partnership forged in shared purpose and genuine feeling. 3 days, Sylvia whispered against his lips. "Then we end this." Across the city, in Stefan's penthouse, Tina slipped the bathroom surveillance detector back into its hiding place, her resolve hardened by her clandestine communication with Sylvia and James. She checked her watch, 2 minutes before Stefan would expect her in bed, playing the role of dutiful wife one last time. As she reached for the door, her phone vibrated with an incoming message. Not her secure line, but the phone Stefan monitored. She glanced at the screen and felt ice form in her veins. A message from an unknown number, containing a single photograph. James's car parked outside her penthouse building, with Sylvia visible. In the passenger seat, below the image, 5 words that changed everything. "I know who you are." The trap was sprung, but not in the way she had planned. Stefan wasn't just suspicious, he knew. The endgame had begun. Chapter 8. Unmasked. He knows. Tina stared at the message on her phone, her mind racing through possible escape scenarios. The photograph of Sylvia and James confirmed her worst fears. Stefan had been investigating her sister's whereabouts all along. The charade was over. Footsteps approached the bathroom door. Stefan. With practiced calm, Tina deleted the message, slipped the phone into her robe pocket, and arranged her features into the mask of submission she'd perfected over the past weeks. When Stefan entered, she was brushing her hair at the vanity, the picture of domestic tranquility. "You've been in here for 15 minutes, he observed, his tone deceptively casual as he leaned against the doorframe. "I'm sorry," Tina replied softly. "I lost track of time." Stefan's piercing blue eyes met hers in the mirror, cold and calculating. "Time is a curious thing, isn't it? 3 weeks can feel like 3 years when you're playing a role that doesn't suit you." Tina's hand faltered imperceptibly on the hairbrush. "Tell me," Stefan continued, moving behind her with predatory grace, "how is your sister enjoying her stay at your penthouse? Is James Ellis providing adequate protection?" The mask slipped. For a fraction of a second, Tina's true expression, fierce defiance, flashed across her face before she could regain control. But it was enough. Stefan had seen it. His laugh held no humor as he reached for her chin, gripping it with cruel fingers to force her to meet his gaze. "Did you really think I wouldn't know the difference between my wife and her arrogant twin? Sylvia would never look at me the way you do, with disgust barely concealed behind those obedient eyes." "How long have you known?" Tina asked, abandoning the pretense. "From the beginning?" "No, but certainly by the end of the first week." His grip tightened painfully. "You were good, I'll grant you that. You studied her mannerisms, her habits, but you could never truly replicate her fear." Stefan released her abruptly, pushing her away as he straightened his expensive shirt cuffs. "I was curious how far you'd take this little charade. What evidence? You thought you could gather who you might contact." His smile was razor-sharp. "I've been watching you watch me, Tina." "Then you know what I've found," Tina said, rising to her full height, no longer concealing her true nature. "Financial records, offshore accounts, evidence of human trafficking through your luxury hotels, enough to destroy everything you've built." "Allegations," Stefan dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Circumstantial evidence at best, nothing that my lawyers and friends in high places can't handle." He moved toward her, no longer bothering to hide the menace in his posture. "What's far more interesting is what you've revealed about yourself and your weakness for your pathetic sister." Tina's hand moved subtly toward the concealed knife she'd kept strapped to her thigh since day one. But Stefan was faster. His hand caught her wrist in a punishing grip. "Looking for this?" With his free hand, he produced the ceramic blade from his pocket. "I found it days ago while you were sleeping. Did you really think I wouldn't search my own wife after becoming suspicious?" "She's not your wife anymore," Tina spat, abandoning caution. "She's free of you." "Temporarily," Stefan corrected, his voice chillingly pleasant. "You see, while you've been playing detective in my home, I've had professionals tracking your sister's movements, documenting her blossoming relationship with your head of security, preparing for the moment when I would reclaim what's mine." Fear, not for herself, but for Sylvia, flashed through Tina. "You'll never touch her again." "On the contrary," Stefan replied, releasing her wrist with casual disdain. "I've already set events in motion. By now, my associates should be approaching your penthouse." He checked his watch with exaggerated care. "In fact, they're probably already there." Tina lunged for her phone, but Stefan was prepared. His hand shot out, catching her across the face with enough force to send her crashing into the marble countertop. Pain exploded through her temple as she struggled to maintain consciousness. "I've indulged your little game long enough," Stefan said, standing over her with cold fury. "Now we're going to play by my rules. You will call your sister and tell her to surrender herself to my men. In exchange, I might consider letting you live." Blood trickled down Tina's face as she glared up at him, defiance burning through the pain. "I'd rather die." "That can be arranged," Stefan replied, producing a handgun from his waistband. "But not until after you've witnessed your sister's return to her rightful place, and not until after I've dealt with the man who dared touch what belongs to me." Across the city, James's security system blared to life, red warning lights flashing throughout Tina's penthouse as perimeter alerts triggered simultaneously on multiple floors. "They're here," James announced, already in motion, weapon drawn, as he secured the panic room door behind Sylvia. "Stay inside. No matter what you hear, do not open this door for anyone but me or Michelle." "James, no," Sylvia protested, gripping his arm. "There are too many of them. The security feed showed. At least 6 men. I've handled worse odds." His voice was calm, professional, but his eyes betrayed deeper emotions as they lingered on her face. "The room is stocked with supplies, communication equipment, and emergency exits. If I don't return in 30 minutes, contact the number labeled Contingency on the secure phone. An extraction team will come for you." Sylvia's training from the past weeks kicked in, overriding her fear with clear-headed focus. "Take this," she said, removing the flash drive containing Tina's evidence from around her neck. "If something happens to me, this still needs to reach the authorities." James took the drive, tucking it securely into an inner pocket. Then, with sudden intensity, he pulled her to him for a fierce, desperate kiss. "Nothing will happen to you," he promised against her lips. "I won't allow it." The security system blared another warning. Intruders had breached the 35th floor. Time had run out. 30 minutes, James repeated, his expression hardening into the soldier he had once been. "If I'm not back, don't wait, run." As the panic room door sealed behind him, Sylvia moved to the security monitors, watching as James systematically positioned himself for the coming confrontation. His movements were precise, efficient, a deadly predator preparing to defend his territory. The first attacker entered the penthouse through the service elevator, weapon raised. James moved like shadow and smoke, disabling the man with brutal efficiency before vanishing back into the apartment's darkness. The second and third intruders fell in similar fashion, never seeing the threat until it was too late. But the fourth man was more cautious, more experienced. He fired blindly into the shadows where James had disappeared, the muzzle flash illuminating the grim determination on his face. Sylvia's hands pressed against the monitor as she watched James take a grazing hit to his shoulder, blood darkening his shirt as he rolled behind the kitchen island for cover. Despite his injury, his return fire was devastatingly accurate. The fourth attacker went down. 2 more remained, and they had learned from their companions' mistakes. They split up, approaching from different angles, using furniture as cover. One of them spoke into a comm device, presumably reporting their progress to Stefan. The thought of Stefan orchestrating this attack, of Tina still trapped in his grasp, filled Sylvia with cold fury. She had spent too long being a victim, too long watching others fight her battles. The woman she had been before Stefan, strong, determined, fiercely protective of those she loved, surged forward from the shadows of her psyche. James was outnumbered. Injured, fighting to protect her while her sister remained in danger. She glanced at the monitor showing the remaining attackers' positions, then at the panic room's weapons locker. Inside were standard security implements, a taser, pepper spray, a single handgun with ammunition. Sylvia made her decision. The James who had trained her these past weeks would be furious. The James who had kissed her with such desperate tenderness moments ago would be terrified. But the James who recognized the warrior beneath her scars would understand. She keyed in the override code for the panic room door, armed herself with quick, practiced movements, and prepared to enter the fray. This time, she would be the one doing the saving. Chapter 9. Flames of Vengeance. Blood trickled down James's arm as he pressed himself against the wall, listening for the intruder's movements. His military training had taken over. Conserve ammunition, control breathing, prioritize threats. 2 hostiles remained, both professionals based on their tactical approach. His shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, but the pain was a distant concern. Compared to Sylvia's safety, a soft sound from the hallway leading to the panic room made his blood run cold. "No," he whispered, recognizing the distinctive click of the panic room door, disengaging. "Sylvia, don't—" His warning died in his throat as one of the intruders emerged from the dining room, weapon raised. James fired twice, dropping the man, but the noise alerted the final attacker to his position. Return fire splintered the wall inches from his head, forcing him to retreat deeper into the apartment. In the hallway beyond, Sylvia moved with the stealth James had taught her over the past weeks. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady on the weapon she'd taken from the panic room. The self-defense techniques, the countless hours of training, the confidence James had instilled in her, all of it crystallized into focused determination. She would not be a victim again. Not ever. The remaining intruder was advancing on James's position, unaware of her approach from behind. Sylvia remembered James's instructions. Breathe, focus, commit. She raised the taser and fired. The man convulsed as the electrodes made contact, his weapon clattering to the floor. Before he could recover, James was on him, delivering a precise blow that rendered him unconscious. Their eyes met across the room, James's filled with relief, anger, and admiration all at once. "I told you to stay in the panic room," he said, his voice rough with emotion as he crossed to her, "and I decided not to." Sylvia replied simply, lowering the taser. "We don't have time to argue. Tina's still with Stefan, and he knows everything." James nodded, instantly refocusing on the mission. "We need to move. There could be more of them coming." He retrieved his phone, sending a rapid series of coded messages to his security contacts. "Michelle is activating our contingency plan. We have a safe extraction point and federal contacts who aren't in Stefan's pocket." "We're not extracting," Sylvia said with quiet determination. "We're going after my sister." "Sylvia, she wouldn't abandon me, and I won't abandon her." Her voice left no room for argument. "I know you have tactical gear here. I know you have a plan for this scenario. We're implementing it now." James studied her, seeing not the broken woman who had arrived at this penthouse 6 weeks ago, but a phoenix risen from her own ashes, stronger, fiercer, unwilling to be caged ever again. 10 minutes, he finally said. "We gear up, coordinate with Michelle, and move." Meanwhile, in Stefan's penthouse, Tina struggled against the zip ties securing her to a dining chair, the plastic cutting into her wrists as Stefan paced impatiently before her. "Your men should have reported in by now," she observed, her tone deliberately provocative, despite the blood drying on her temple. "Perhaps James Ellis is more formidable than you anticipated." Stefan's composure slipped momentarily, his hand twitching toward her before he regained control. "A temporary setback. I have resources beyond your imagination, Tina." "And I have evidence beyond yours," she countered. "Did you really think I'd keep it all in one place? That USB drive was just a copy. The originals were uploaded to secure servers the moment I obtained them. If I don't check in every 12 hours, the evidence goes automatically to the FBI, Interpol, and several major news outlets." Uncertainty flickered across Stefan's face before his arrogance reasserted itself. "You're bluffing." "You've spent 3 years terrorizing my sister," Tina replied, her voice deadly calm. "Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies, dead man switches, that I would leave anything to chance when it came to destroying you?" Stefan's phone rang, interrupting their psychological battle. He answered it, his expression darkening as he listened to the caller. "What do you mean, no contact? Send the backup team." He ended the call abruptly, fury radiating from him in palpable waves. "Trouble with your retrieval operation?" Tina asked, unable to hide her satisfaction. Stefan crossed the room in 2 strides, backhanding her with enough force to send the chair teetering precariously before settling back on 4 legs. "Your overconfidence is becoming tiresome. And your predictability is becoming boring," Tina replied, spitting blood onto his immaculate carpet. "Hit me again. Prove what a big man you are. It won't change the fact that you've already lost." "Lost?" Stefan laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "I own judges, senators, police captains. Whatever evidence you think you have will disappear before it ever reaches a courtroom." "Perhaps," Tina conceded, "but can you make the public's interest disappear just as easily? The media coverage, the questions from your investors when they learn their money is tied to human trafficking operations." She was playing a dangerous game, pushing him toward the edge of his control, but every minute she kept him talking was another minute for Sylvia and James to escape or to come for her, if that was their plan. Knowing her sister and the protector, who had clearly fallen for her, Tina suspected the latter. "You know nothing about my operations," Stefan snarled, his composure cracking further. "I know enough," Tina countered. "The shipping manifests disguising human cargo as luxury textiles, the special exclusive suites in your hotels where the merchandise is temporarily housed, the private clients who pay premium rates for these special accommodations. Shall I continue?" Stefan's facade of civilized businessman completely collapsed. He grabbed her throat, squeezing with punishing force. "You self-righteous bitch! Do you have any idea what you're interfering with? The power of the people involved? They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." Tina struggled for breath, spots dancing before her eyes, but she managed a defiant smile. "Then I'll see you in hell, Stefan, because they're coming for you too." Just as consciousness began to fade, the penthouse security system blared to life. Stefan released her, moving swiftly to the control panel as warning lights flashed throughout the apartment. "Perimeter breach," he muttered, reaching for his weapon. "How?" The power cut abruptly, plunging the penthouse into darkness before. Emergency lighting activated with a dull red glow. Tina recognized the tactical approach immediately, standard extraction protocol that James had developed for high-risk situations. They had come for her. In the sudden confusion, Tina threw herself, sideways, chair and all, crashing to the floor with enough force to splinter one of the wooden legs. The pain was excruciating, but it gave her the leverage she needed to work her bound hands against the broken wood, sawing at the zip ties with desperate intensity. Stefan moved through the apartment with the caution of a man who understood he was being hunted, his weapon raised as he systematically checked each shadow. Come out, wherever you are," he called, false bravado masking the fear that had begun to leak into his voice. A flash of movement from the terrace caught his attention. He fired twice, shattering the glass doors, but hit nothing but darkness. The distraction was all Tina needed. With a final, painful effort, she severed the zip ties and freed herself from the broken chair. Blood slicked her wrists, but adrenaline dulled the pain as she moved silently toward the kitchen where she knew Stefan kept a second weapon. Outside on the building's maintenance ledge, Sylvia and James advanced with careful precision. Both wore tactical gear, lightweight body armor, communication devices, night vision equipment. James moved with the fluid grace of someone who had done this many times before. Sylvia followed his lead, her fear transmuted into focused determination. "Remember the plan," James said softly into his comm. "I create the distraction, you locate Tina, we exit through the service elevator Michelle has secured. 26 floors up, wind at 15 knots, and you're worried about me remembering." "The plan," Sylvia replied, her attempt at humor betrayed by the tremor in her voice. James paused, turning to face her. Even through the tactical gear, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. "You don't have to do this. I can extract Tina alone." "Yes, I do," Sylvia said firmly. "This ends tonight, and I need to be part of ending it." James nodded once, understanding. Then, with practiced efficiency, he attached a small device to the window near Stefan's study. "Glass breaker, silent, creates a clean entry point. On my signal." Inside the penthouse, Tina had reached the kitchen, her fingers closing around the cold metal of Stefan's backup weapon. She checked the magazine, fully loaded, and moved back toward the main living area where Stefan was still searching for the intruders. The sound of breaking glass from the study drew his attention. He moved swiftly in that direction, weapon raised, unaware that Tina was now armed and behind him. "Drop it, Stefan," she commanded, her voice steady despite her injuries. He froze, then slowly turned to face her, his expression shifting from shock to calculating menace. "You won't shoot me, Tina. You're not a killer." "People change," Tina replied, the gun unwavering in her hands. "You taught my sister that. Now I'm teaching you." A fleeting smile crossed Stefan's face. Not surrender, but recognition of a piece on the chessboard. Before Tina could react, he dove sideways, firing toward her as he sought cover behind the massive sofa. The bullet caught her in the side, the impact sending her stumbling backward against the dining table. Pain exploded through her body, but she maintained her grip on the weapon, returning fire as she slid to the floor. Through the haze of shock and adrenaline, Tina heard more glass breaking, followed by the distinctive sound of tactical boots on the marble floor. James had breached the penthouse. Stefan heard it too. His attention divided. He fired wildly toward the new threat, giving Tina a moment to press her hand against her bleeding side and try to regain her focus. "Tina." Sylvia's voice, so similar to her own, yet filled with a strength Tina hadn't heard in years, cut through the chaos. "Here," Tina called weakly, trying to alert her sister without drawing Stefan's fire. Too late, she realized her mistake. Stefan had heard as well, and he was now moving toward the sound of her voice, using the furniture as cover. She raised her weapon again, but blood loss was making her vision blur, her hand unsteady. The distinctive crack of a different weapon echoed through the penthouse. Stefan cried out in pain, dropping to one knee as a bullet tore through his shoulder. Not James's tactical precision, but someone else. Standing in the entrance to the dining room, illuminated by the emergency lighting, was Sylvia. Her face was set in grim determination, the weapon in her hands steady and sure as she advanced on the man who had terrorized her for years. "Hello, husband," she said, her voice cold as winter. "I believe we need to discuss our divorce." Chapter 10. Phoenix Rising. Time seemed to crystallize in that moment. Sylvia standing tall with unwavering resolve, Stefan on his knees clutching his bleeding shoulder, and Tina leaning against the dining table, her own weapon still trained on the gear. Man who had tormented her sister for years. The emergency lights cast everything in a crimson glow, as if the penthouse itself had been transformed into a battleground painted in blood and shadows. "This is impossible," Stefan snarled, his handsome face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You were never this strong. I made sure of it." "No," Sylvia replied, her voice carrying a calm certainty that seemed to fill the entire room. "You tried to break me. You nearly succeeded. But you could never erase who I truly am." She advanced another step, her weapon never wavering. "I was strong before you. I'm stronger now because of what I survived." James appeared in the doorway behind her, his tactical gear marking him as the professional soldier he had once been. Blood from his shoulder wound had darkened the fabric of his sleeve, but his stance remained solid, unwavering. His own weapon was aimed at Stefan, but he made no move to intervene. This was Sylvia's moment, her confrontation, her closure. "You think this changes anything?" Stefan laughed, though pain and fear had begun to leak through his arrogant facade. "I still own you, my name, my ring, You're nothing," Sylvia interrupted, her voice resonating with quiet power. "You own nothing, Stefan, not me, not my sister, and after tonight, not even your freedom." With deliberate precision, she removed her wedding ring and tossed it at his feet. The platinum band clinked against the marble floor, the sound oddly final in the tense silence that followed, the period at the end of a 3-year sentence. "It's over," she said simply. For a moment, something like genuine emotion flickered across Stefan's face, not remorse or regret, but the desperate fury of a man watching his control slip away. With unexpected speed, he lunged for the weapon he had dropped, fingers closing. Around the grip, 3 shots fired simultaneously, Sylvia's, Tina's and James's, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Stefan collapsed, his weapon unfired, blood blooming across his chest like crimson flowers. "Sylvia," he gasped, reaching toward her with a bloodied hand, his voice suddenly bereft of its usual cruelty. "Please." She regarded him without pity, without hatred, only the clear-eyed judgment of someone seeing truth without illusion. "You never loved me," she said quietly. "You only loved possessing me." "Help! Me!" Stefan struggled to speak, his breathing labored as his piercing blue eyes, now dulled with pain, sought hers one last time. James was already moving, securing Stefan's weapon while checking his wounds with professional detachment. "He'll live," he announced after a moment, "at least until the authorities arrive." Tina slid down the wall, her own injury finally overwhelming her as the adrenaline began to fade. "Speaking of authorities," she managed through gritted teeth, "we should probably call the ones on our side." Sylvia rushed to her twin, the confrontation with Stefan forgotten as she knelt beside her sister. "You're hurt," she said, applying pressure to the wound with steady hands that no longer trembled with fear. "Worth it," Tina replied with a pained smile. "You should see the other guy." The sisters' eyes met, identical in appearance, but now matched, in strength as well. No words were needed, their twin bond had always transcended language. In that glance was shared pain, shared triumph, and the unbreakable connection that had ultimately saved them both. James spoke quietly into his comm unit, coordinating with Michelle and their trusted federal contacts. "Extraction team is 3 minutes out. Medical support confirmed, evidence secured and transmitted." "It's really over?" Sylvia asked, still holding pressure on Tina's wound. "Yes," James replied, his professional demeanor softening as he looked at her with a tenderness that belied the violence of the night. "His network will take longer to dismantle, but Stefan Dan will never hurt anyone again." As sirens wailed in the distance, Sylvia looked around the luxurious penthouse that had been her prison for 3 years. The marble floors she had scrubbed on her knees when Stefan claimed she hadn't been thorough enough. The walls that had witnessed her tears, the rooms where her spirit had nearly been extinguished, now bathed in the flashing blue and red lights. From the approaching emergency vehicles, it seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating, just an apartment, not a fortress. She felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sense of release, as if chains she had carried for so long had finally fallen away, leaving her weightless in their absence. 6 months later, sunlight streamed through the windows of Ramsey Couture's Manhattan headquarters, illuminating the gleaming showroom where mannequins displayed the company's newest collection, Phoenix, designed by Sylvia Ramsey in her triumphant return to the fashion world. Sylvia stood in the center of the room, making final adjustments. to a stunning evening gown that seemed to transform from structured constraint at the bodice to liberated flowing fabric at the hem, the physical manifestation of her own journey from captivity to freedom. Golden threads woven throughout caught the light, giving the impression of flames dancing amid the fabric's flow. "It's perfect," Tina declared, entering the showroom with the confident stride that had made her one of New York's most formidable CEOs. The scar on her temple from Stefan's attack was barely visible now, though she made no effort to conceal it. Like her sister, she wore her scars, both physical and emotional, as badges of survival rather than marks of shame. "Almost perfect," Sylvia corrected, adjusting a seam with practiced precision. "The runway show is tomorrow. Everything has to be flawless." "Speaking of flawless," Tina said with a knowing smile, "a certain head of security was looking for you." "Something about dinner reservations?" Sylvia blushed, still unused to the open acknowledgement of her relationship with James. They had taken things slowly after the confrontation with Stefan, both recognizing that healing couldn't be rushed, that trust was built in small moments of safety rather than grand gestures. But over the months, as Sylvia reclaimed her life piece by piece, their connection had deepened into something neither had believed possible after their respective traumas. "I'll be ready on time," Sylvia promised, smoothing the fabric one last time before stepping back to admire her work. "How was the court hearing?" Tina's expression turned serious. Stefan's lawyers tried to suppress the evidence again, but Judge Hartman refused. "The trafficking charges will stand. We've identified 3 more victims willing to testify." Sylvia nodded, a brief shadow crossing her face before dissolving into resolve. "Good. They deserve justice, too." Later that evening, as she prepared for dinner, Sylvia caught her reflection in the mirror of her new apartment, a space that was entirely her own, filled with colors and textures she had chosen, arranged according to her preferences alone. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the hollow-eyed shell who had stared back from Stefan's bathroom mirror all those months ago. This woman stood tall, her eyes clear and confident, her smile genuine. She had reclaimed not just her freedom, but her identity. The bruises had long faded, but the strength that had carried her through the darkness remained, tempered now with a hard-won wisdom about both human cruelty and resilience. A knock at the door announced James's arrival. He entered with a small bouquet of wildflowers, never roses, which had been Stefan's manipulative gift of choice, and kissed her with the gentle reverence that still made her heart race. His shoulder had healed well, though he sometimes rubbed it absently when the weather changed. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes warm with an emotion neither of them had been ready to name until recently. "Almost," Sylvia replied. She crossed to her dresser and retrieved a small velvet box. "I have something for you first." James opened it to find a simple silver key. "It's to the apartment," Sylvia explained, a hint of nervousness coloring her voice. "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I thought perhaps it's time for the next step." James's expression softened with understanding. For someone who had lost all autonomy in her previous relationship, offering a key to her private space was no small gesture. It was an act of profound trust, the voluntary opening of a door rather than the breaking of a lock. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her the space to change her mind without judgment. Sylvia nodded, her decision firm. "I'm not afraid anymore, James. Not of the past, not of the future, and certainly not of loving you." He drew her into his arms, the key clutched tightly in his hand. "I love you too," he said simply, the words all the more powerful for their quiet certainty. Across town, in a high-security federal facility, Stefan Dan sat in an interrogation room, his expensive suits replaced by prison orange, his handsome face haggard from 6 months of confinement as his case wound through the justice system. Across from him sat Tina Ramsey and Federal Prosecutor Elena Vasquez, their expressions equally unyielding. "Your cooperation has been noted," Vasquez said, closing a thick file of evidence, "but it doesn't erase your crimes. The best you can hope for is 25 years instead of life without parole. And that's only because your testimony helped us identify the other members of your trafficking network," Tina added, her voice cool and professional. "Not because anyone believes you deserve mercy." Stefan's piercing blue eyes narrowed with the remnants of his old arrogance. "I still have connections, resources you haven't found. This isn't over." "Actually, it is," Tina replied, standing to leave. "Your offshore accounts have been frozen. Your associates have turned on each other. Your name is toxic in every industry. The mighty Stefan Dan exists only in the past tense now." As they prepared to exit, Stefan called after her with desperate malice, "Tell Sylvia I think of her every day. Tell her a part of her will always belong to me." Tina paused in the doorway, her expression almost pitying. "My sister doesn't think of you at all, Stefan. You've become exactly what you feared most, irrelevant." Later that night, after dinner at a small, intimate restaurant where James had first taken her during her recovery, Sylvia stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The same city lights that had once seemed like distant, unreachable stars during her captivity now glittered with possibility. James joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his solid presence a reminder of safety, freely chosen rather than security used as control. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his breath warm against her hair. "The future," Sylvia replied, leaning back against him. "Tina mentioned expanding the brand internationally. My new designs are being featured in Vogue next month. And you—" She turned in his arms to face him. "You make me believe in second chances." "Phoenix Rising," James murmured, echoing the name of her collection. "Exactly." Sylvia smiled, lifting her face for his kiss. "From the ashes of what was into something more beautiful than before." As their lips met, the final pieces of her shattered past seemed to dissolve into the night air. There would always be scars, for both of them, but scars were proof of healing, of survival, of life continuing despite pain. Inside the apartment, Sylvia's phone chimed with a message from Tina. "It's done. 25 years, no possibility of early release. We won." Sylvia read the text, then turned it off without replying. Tonight wasn't about Stefan or the past. Tonight, and all the nights to come, belonged to her future, to the woman she had reclaimed and the love she had found in the most unexpected circumstances. "Come to bed," she whispered to James, leading him by the hand into the warmth of her home, her sanctuary, her choice, her life rebuilt on her own terms. Behind them, the city lights continued to glitter against the darkness, a fitting backdrop to a story of twin hearts forged in fire, of love rising from revenge, of women who had discovered that their greatest strength lay not in destroying their enemy, but in reclaiming themselves.